Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Friday, October 15th, 2021. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here this afternoon as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that page and click on the Start Here link in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of that book contains a narrative description of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 17 years to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience into part of the infallible guidance system that each one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Download it, print it off, use it as often as you'd like. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows like this one where people have either been stepped through the use of that tool or given powerful testimonials about how the use of that tool has improved their lives. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness and get access to a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet, an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do that soon and often because that frequently leads them to have comments, questions, or testimonials. If you have any of those, give us a call at 563-999-3581. When you call that number and press 1, it'll put a little question mark by your phone number, and I'll announce you by your area code. And we hope people do that soon and often. If you have questions but you're listening in the archives, you can send us an email at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. Or you can send an email to Jeannie, Jeanie, at whyagain.org, whyagain.org. So, we are also doing the Course in Miracles workbook lessons this year, and today is the 288th day of the year. Today's lesson simply reads, Let me forget my brother's past today. The commentary reads, This is the thought that leads the way to you, Creator, and brings me to my goal. I cannot come to you without my brothers and sisters. And to know my source, I must first recognize that you created and you were created one with me. My brother and sister have hands that lead me on the way to you. Their sins are in the past along with mine, and I am, quote, saved, close quote, because the past is gone. Let me not cherish it within my heart. Let me not cherish the past, or I will lose the way to walk to you, Creator. My brothers and sisters are my saviors. Let me not attack the Savior you have given me, but let me honor them who bear your name, and so remember it as my own. Forgive me, then, today, and you will know you have forgiven me if you behold your brother and sister in the light of holiness. They cannot be less holy than I can, and you cannot be holier than he. So that's the Course in Miracles experiment, or Course in Miracles workbook lesson. And the Course in Miracles experiment from Pam Grout, lesson 288, is titled Sparkling with Energy. She quotes Oprah as saying, "The more you praise and celebrate your life, the more there is to praise and celebrate." Pam writes, I'd like to interrupt this book with an important non-commercial announcement. You are already a master at creating reality. You can't not be. By virtue of being alive, this power is yours. Like all things vital to your well-being, air, sunshine, just to name a couple, that you already take for granted, the energy to create worlds is your birthright, and you do it every day at every second. The trick is to let go of the default, quote, reality, close quote, that you focus on now, and once you do, the minute you let go of the reality that you were mistakenly taught, it's impossible to avoid joy, peace, and daily blessings. These will stalk you like Freddy Krueger. You've been taught that, quote, life is a struggle, close quote, and that nothing comes easy. You've erroneously mastered the idea that people are not to be trusted, and that it's important to, quote, be careful, close quotes. And now, look how good you've been at creating just that very reality. In fact, it would be highly appropriate to get up right now and take a bow. While you're standing, go ahead and do the Harlem Shuffle, because once you let go of the old reality that you created so successfully, the one with a deck of cards that proclaims sickness is inevitable and abundance is limited, and that good things sometimes happen, but not all the time. Once you let go of that reality, you can customize your reality to your liking. Congratulations. You are now free to roam around the planet. So that's our lesson 288. Let me forget the past today. Let me forget my brother and sister's past. As mine is in the past, so is theirs. Let me remember that they are made as you are, and we are all as holy as one another. So, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. And if you call that number and press 1, we can have a conversation. How would you like to spend this next hour? We have been talking throughout the week about some of the tremendous similarities between the tools or the suggestions made in the 15 Commitments of Conscious Relationship and the work that we do in Mindshifters Radio and Mindshifters support groups. So far we've gotten through the first 3, and we're at the 4th commitment. And the 4th commitment, and just a general reminder, all of the commitments have a conscious way to relate to them and an unconscious way to relate to them. And above the line is the conscious way, and below the line is the unconscious way. And the 4th commitment is, I commit to saying what is true for me, and I commit to being a person to whom others can express themselves with candor. And there are some important concepts here. Most of us know of people who talk about how they want to be brutally honest. And as we've talked about before, most people, maybe not all, but most people who talk about being brutally honest are far more interested in being brutal than they are in being honest. And they use it as a weapon. They use it as a way to distance from people. And so we want to highlight that that is not what this is about. This is about making a commitment to talk about what's true for me, to be open and be conscious and aware, and to be, they use the word candor, to be frank to whatever degree that I can actually do that and be aware of what's going on with me, etc. They give the example of the person who shows up at work and the boss says, "What time did you show up at work?" And they look at their watch and they say, 9:15. Now, if that's what their watch says, then they were being honest. They were being accurate. And it's as well as they knew, that's what time they got to work. However, if they didn't realize that their watch had stopped at 9:15 and it was really 9:40 when they got to work, it was only the truth as they knew it. It wasn't the whole truth. So many of us intend to be true, and we talk about what's true for us and what we know, and yet it's not the whole truth. And sometimes we only tell a part of the truth. The example would be when somebody says, "Who did you have lunch with?" And you say, this is a person at work asking me, and they say, "Who did you have lunch with?" And I say, "Oh, I had lunch with an old college friend." And that's true. However, if the old college friend is also a recruiter for another company who's trying to hire me away and I don't say it, then I'm not using candor. I'm not being completely open. And what they've talked about, and what a couple of their mentors are Gay and Catherine Hendricks, which are these wonderful, very intelligent, mature, experienced marital therapy couple. They have a wonderful story about being on the Oprah show, and one of the things about being on the Oprah show they talk about is the audience got almost physically violent. They were afraid that they were on the wrong TV show because the audience got so violent. And what did they get so violent over? They got so violent when Gay and Catherine Hendricks recommended complete honesty in intimate relationship. And that should just give you an idea of how strongly our culture is conditioned to keep secrets, and even from our most intimate relationships. So, because the Hendricks have that as one of their tenets, one of the things they've observed is the way to increase intimacy in a relationship is to be as open, as honest as you possibly can. That's woven into the 15 commitments of conscious leadership. And when I was going through the book, that was one of the things that was hardest for me as I listened to that chapter, because I thought of different places in my life where it would be really difficult, or I wouldn't even want to be that honest with certain people. And they address that in this book, right? They talk about choosing who you engage in this process with. And they say it's probably a really good thing when you begin this work to only choose to have this commitment with people that agree to commit to that level of honesty and openness and candor with you. And after you've gotten really good at it, you might choose to expand that circle. They talk about 3 circles. One is truthfulness, one is openness, and one is awareness. And so in truthfulness, what I say represents my reality as accurately as I can. And in the openness circle, I say everything I need to say. And in the awareness circle, I see as much as there is to see. So in a situation where I'm not aware that my watch stopped, I can't tell people, here's the actual time that I got to work. All I can tell them is what my watch said when I got to work. And the opposite of truthfulness is lying, the opposite of openness is withholding, and the opposite of awareness is uninformed. And so they're talking about how to be the most sustainably productive leader you can in these 15 commitments of conscious leadership. And so they say it's critically important for me to develop a network that will give me feedback, and for me to develop the ability to let that feedback in. That's how I expand my awareness. So the more I withhold things, the more I withdraw, and the more I project things onto others, or my image of others. The more I reveal, the more I connect with people, and the more I own about what's going on for me. And so they talk about the importance of revealing the truth of what I'm thinking, what my emotions are, and what my physical sensations are. But they also recognize that this isn't as useful in a situation where I'm the only one doing that. So they suggest that to begin with this process, I might want to wait until I find people, whether it's at work or in my personal relationships, who agree to the same rules of candor and openness and awareness, allowing feedback, etc. One of the things that they understand is projection. And they understand that if I see somebody as being disrespectful, this is exactly like Dr. Michael Rice's codependence to interdependence worksheet. Yeah, I think that's the lecture it comes from, where he says, make a list of everything that anybody who's ever offended you, and write their name in the far left-hand column of a sheet of paper, and then make another column and write very briefly what they did to offend you, and then another column to the right of that and write down what your punishment thought is for them, and then write down in the fourth column what your advice is to them, and then in the fifth column, write how you're going to apply your advice to them in your life. And they have that same wisdom here in the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, and they say, when I see somebody as being disrespectful, I'm at least at some level, especially if I have a strong emotional upset about it, I'm projecting that onto them. And ownership is the opposite of projection. And when we own our projections, we see that our judgment about our boss being disrespectful is really a useful insight I can use about my own disrespect. And once I notice that I'm having a negative judgment of somebody else, and it comes with a negative emotional response on my part, the very best use of my energy at that point is to take a breath, turn the focus inside, and ask, okay, how am I being this, or doing this, or exhibiting this trait? Once we notice that judgment always has a component of projection in it, then we can ask these wonder questions like, how am I being disrespectful in my life? How am I being disrespectful toward my boss rather than him being disrespectful for me? How am I being disrespectful toward myself? These wonder questions, the way they list them, sound very much like Byron Katie's questions and her turnarounds. So I can turn it around over and over again. I can realize any negative emotion I experience is part of an innate feedback system, an alarm system to tell me there's something off the mark or in error about my own thoughts. And if I have a negative judgment about somebody else, the very best use of that is to turn it around and ask myself, okay, how am I being negative in this way? If I think somebody's being dishonest, all right, where am I still judging myself negatively for being dishonest? If I think somebody's being disrespectful and I get upset about it, all right, how am I being disrespectful? Or the turnaround, how are they actually respecting me with what they're saying or doing? Remember, and they point this out over and over again, wonder questions come from curiosity and they leave me open, soft and open to receive input and answers. It's not about, I have got to figure out right now how this is. It's not a driven thing from the conscious logical mind. It's wondering. It's putting myself in that open, allowing space that Rilke, the poet Rilke, would call living in the question. And this is the part where they talk about, okay, but what if I act this way and my boss doesn't? Aren't I going to set myself up for trouble? And they say, well, there are two responses we give this question. Initially, we suggest you only practice this kind of candor, this openness, this complete honesty and openness, when you have a shared commitment to do that with someone else. And they talk about commitment being a cornerstone of all relationships, this open, honest candor being a cornerstone of all intimate, committed relationships. And it's really good to get explicit about that. The second response to the question is, once you've been practicing in the co-committed relationships and you've developed some mastery with this skill, increase your own awareness, increase your own comfort with being open, increase your ability to talk about, to make statements that are unarguably true, so they're based on what your thoughts are, what your emotions are, and what your physical sensations are. Once you've developed that skill, then you can start experimenting with relating that way to people who don't know anything about what you're doing. And in their experience, when we do this, we'll learn many wonderful lessons, not the least of which is who you are, the core of your being, can't actually be hurt with openness and candor. Remember, candor is about you revealing to learn about yourself and to build the potential for relational connectedness. It's not about trying to change somebody else. The reason they so strongly promote this openness is because they understand it increases the flow of energy. It increases access to energy, creative energy, physical energy, mental, emotional energy. And withholding decreases our energy. You know, one of the ways I talk about this with people is to say, it's our secrets that keep us sick. And the actual dynamic for that is that every time I put 5 or 10 units of mental, emotional energy into keeping a secret from somebody, I'm also pouring the same amount of energy into the conclusion within me that I'm damaged, broken, and or unlovable. And if whoever I'm keeping this secret from finds out the secret, they will either attack me or run away from me. That's the dynamic by which my secrets keep me sick. So, it is a drain of my energy. It is a closing down. It is something that keeps me in lack of awareness. And they're recommending the reverse. The more I stay open, the more I increase my awareness, and the more I am speaking from what is unarguably true, which is basically I'm describing my thoughts, my emotions, and my physical sensations. The more I increase the flow of energy and interaction and intimacy in the relationships I engage in. The more I do that, the more I see reality as it actually is more clearly. So the commitment is I commit to saying what is true for me, and I commit to being a person to whom others can express themselves with candor. So the power of projection is a core in the Way of Mastery. If you want to read about projection in Lesson 3 of the Way of Mastery, which is the lesson on forgiveness, they explore this dynamic of projection. I project into my mind's eye the image of someone else with my issue on them. They give an example. They say that a blind spot that they encounter in leaders involves this power of projection. And they talk about projection as part of withholding, withdrawing, and projecting. But also, we can turn it around if we are awake to the fact that when we judge somebody else, there's always a part of that that's projection. We can turn that around and get clarity about our own issues. For example, they coached a leader who was certain that a few of his peers were out to get him. He worked in a political environment that was filled with intrigue. And as we coached him, something became clear. He was definitely out to get his peers. He spent significant amounts of time working to position himself in the best light and to cast others unfavorably. More importantly, he was initially blind to that behavior. Rather than face it in himself, he projected it onto them, and he believed it to be true about them. Now, they go on to say, let's be clear, their client's peers might also have been out to get him, and at the same time, his inability to see it in himself strengthened the image that he got in his mind about other people being out to get him. They coach people to learn to eat their own projections. It's a master skill of conscious leaders. We accomplish this by listing our beliefs and complaints about others and then asking ourselves, how is this true about me? How am I not facing this in myself? So, the next thing in this chapter is to talk about how to speak unarguably. Granted, anyone can choose to argue about anything. But what they're recommending here is that people learn to speak about their own thoughts, their own physical sensations, and their own emotions. I say what's true for me without insisting this is the truth. Most of the unconscious leaders lead from either villain, victim, or hero mode, and they spend a majority of their time in the drama about what is highly arguable. They would even go so far as to say that all drama in the triangle of villain, victim, hero revolves around what is arguable and the commitment people make to being right about that. Great leaders learn to reveal what is true for them and reveal it in a way that is unarguable. Based on the work of the Hendricks Foundation, 3 types of reveals are unarguable: a thought, a feeling, and a sensation. What I'm thinking, what my emotion is in the moment, and what my physical sensations are in the moment. For example, if you say, "We have to get a new head of our department of surgery," that statement is arguable. Many could and would argue with its truthfulness. Most suboptimal drama-based conversations involve people arguing in an attempt to be right. On the other hand, if you say, "I'm having the thought that we ought to find a new head of our department of surgery," that statement is not arguable. You're merely reporting that you had a thought. That the thought occurred is a fact. People can argue about it if they want, but it's not an arguable issue. That the thought is true or right is highly arguable. Great leaders and teams practice and become experts at revealing their unarguable experience. Quote, "I'm having a thought that ... And they make these statements without any attachment to being right. They share it and they stay in that open, curious space about it. They don't need to defend it from an ego standpoint. When this kind of candor is met with curiosity and deep listening, as in, quote, "Tell me more about that thought. I'm curious to know what you think," close quotes, then amazing breakthroughs of insight and innovation can occur, and often do. So here they offer 3 forms of unarguable communication. I'm having the thought that ... I feel ... and then follow it with one of the 4 or 5 core emotions that they identify in this work: sad, scared, angry, joyful, or sexual. The 3rd form is, I'm having the body sensation of ... Examples might include pinching in my shoulder blades, swirling in my belly, throbbing in my temples. Learning to differentiate between unarguable and arguable statements is a master skill of leadership and candor. Often simply saying that is unarguable will end drama right on the spot. To speak with candor is to reveal what is unarguable with truthfulness, openness, and as much awareness as you can muster. One final point about candor. At any particular time, leaders are operating from either fear or love. This is simple yet profoundly true. Underneath all withholds is fear. Anytime I withhold something, it's because of fear. We choose to withhold because we're afraid of fill in the blank, losing approval, losing control, losing security. And conversely, true candor comes from love. It couldn't be said any better than when the Bible says, speak the truth in love. Real candor is expressing the unarguable truth from a place of love. When you develop a mastery of candor, you speak the unarguable truth to all relevant parties with thoughtfulness and kindness. Notice the difference between that and people who take great pride in being brutally honest. As I mentioned earlier, most of those people are much more invested in being brutal than they are in being honest. This work says we want to do this with thoughtfulness and kindfulness. Speaking from love is not a license to withhold or sugarcoat our unarguable truth because we don't want to, quote, hurt somebody's feelings, close quotes. That's the most common reason people give for not wanting to be candid. Rather, if we choose this path, we speak from love and ask this question: how do I say all my truth in the most loving way possible? Finally, when someone masters the practice of candor, the people they speak with often respond with curiosity and openness. In fact, one of the litmus tests of authentic candor is how others receive it. If people get defensive and argue with you when you're being candid, it's a good time to pause and make sure that what you're really saying is what is unarguable and saying it in the most loving way possible. Sometimes the answer is yes, and the other person is scared and therefore defensive. Even when that's the case, this is a good practice to follow. Checking in to re-examine, am I being respectful? Am I being loving? Am I being as authentic as I can, as open as I can, and as aware as I can in this moment? Great leaders learn to reveal what is true for them by revealing what is unarguable. This is just my position. Every time I go through this section, I think about Brené Brown and her husband. And she wrote an article about how they had this one practice that saved their marriage many times over. The practice is that whenever either one of them gets triggered, they pause and take a breath, and then they decide to tell their partner what's going on for them, but they say it in this format. The story I'm telling myself now is ... And then they lay out whatever their thought, interpretation, emotion, belief, physical sensation is. And the example she gave in the article was one time her husband came home from work. Now, these are two people, they've got kids, they both work full-time jobs, they're very, creative, intelligent, active people. And he came home from work one day and said, "Did you have something planned for dinner?" And Brené just got so triggered that her head started spinning into, I can't believe this male chauvinist, this bastion of the patriarchy, thinking that I have to do all the work here at domestic level, and like I don't have anything better to do than plan a meal. And so she caught herself getting all revved up, and she took a breath, and then she used this tool, and she said to her husband, okay, the story I'm telling myself now is, you think it's my job to make all the meals just because I'm the woman, and it's completely unfair, and it's an unnecessary burden you're putting on me, etc. And when she was done saying the story she was telling herself, he responded by saying, okay, thank you for letting me know that. He said, the reason I asked if you had something planned for dinner is because on the way home from work, I stopped and picked up the makings for lasagna, and if you didn't have anything else planned, I would make lasagna tonight. If you had something else planned, I can make the lasagna on another day. That's what I think of as I read this. Every time I've read this chapter, that comes to mind. So, we want to look at the last piece I'll share before we hope someone's got a comment or question, is that they point out listening filters. We all have them, and they want us to learn how to be conscious in our listening. To do that, I have to be aware of the filters I might be using. Right? And if I'm listening to try and fix something, or I'm listening to prove I'm right, that's not such a good filter. Other listening filters they often see include listening to diagnose. And then as soon as somebody tells me about their director of sales, I say, well, the problem with your director of sales is this. Or I'm listening with the filter on that says, I'm going to correct this problem. And then I say something like, well, this isn't really a communication issue. This is an attitude problem. Or I'm listening with the filter on that says, I want to avoid conflict. And as soon as the other person stops talking, I say, I'm sure that they don't mean to be upsetting to you. I'm confident you can work it out. Or maybe I'm listening with the filter on of defending. And then I say, are you suggesting that I should have done something different with your director of sales? Or I listen from the filter that I'm personalizing what's being said, or I take it all upon myself. As long as these kinds of filters are being used, I'm going to have a heck of a time connecting with the person I'm listening to. It takes awareness, it takes willingness, and they say it takes courage to let go of some of these listening filters and to just be fully present with what others are saying. And yet, it's the way to connect with another person deeply. They encourage people to listen from the head, the heart, and the gut, and to try and come up with an understanding of the intellectual content the person is relaying, with the emotions that they're relaying, and with how they're feeling physically about what they're relaying to you. So, 563-999-3581. We have about 15 minutes left. Plenty of time for a comment, a question, an answer, a recommendation for somebody for me to interview. I got access late last night to the audio and video of the panel discussion that we had on trauma on Saturday at the Integrative Mental Health Summit. And I also had, on that summit was Dr. George Lindenfeld, Dr. David Grand, Brad Yates of EFT tapping and YouTube fame. Our moderator was September Dorman, and I was also on the panel. I also had the privilege of doing an interview with Brad Yates a couple weeks ago and David Grand earlier this week. So, as I work to clear up the technical glitches, I hope to be able to make some of that content available to the Mindshifter radio audience in the not too distant future. And we're open to comments and questions and suggestions about other people that you would like to have us interview or books you'd like us to have us review. Again, you can call us at 563-999-3581 and press 1. Or you can send us an email at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. Or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org, WHYAGAIN.org. So, how would you like to spend the last 15 minutes? That's the fourth commitment from the 15 commitments of conscious leadership, and there'll be more next week unless someone comes up with a different topic that's more fruitful. How can we support you today? What's a question or a comment? How do you see the overlap between this work and what Dr. Michael Rice presents in the Mindshifters radio show and or the Mindshifter support group, or the many lectures he does on everything related to the ancient Aramaic process of forgiveness and communication and relationship? (563-999-3581). Susan. I am hoping the technology lets you speak soon. You're in the spinning wheel.
Can you hear me?
There you go.
Oh, good.
Welcome.
Thanks. I have my grandson Jacob here with me. But I want to say something about all that you talked about honesty. One of the things that helps me the most is a definition of humility that either you mentioned on the show or Michael did, to see the highest and best in oneself and the other and to operate from that standpoint. And I know I've mentioned that before, but it seems as if that is sort of an intention that is established right away when you're in contact with someone else and maybe in difficult negotiation with someone else, that will help you speak the truth in honesty, but not have it be a brutal or harsh truth. Ramakrishna used to say, tell the truth, but not a harsh truth, which is sort of a nice other way of saying that. And then I hope it's okay with Jacob that I talk about this, but we have been looking into ways of interpreting what Jacob is going through. One of them is to think that he may have brain inflammation that is treatable with ibuprofen in the short run, and then blood testing to find out whether there are trigger allergies or infections in the body. I think they call that PANS or PANDAS too. There are two of them. I have people on one side who are strongly advocating this blood testing and so forth and taking action. And yet on the other side, there are really otherwise very open-minded medical people, and in my family too, who say the blood tests are not reliable. They yield a lot of false information, false positives. You've got to take a totally different route. And, of course, Jacob and I are sitting right in the middle of this, and we're in touch with conventional psychiatric people who are wonderful, and I've emailed a doctor who deals with PANS, and I'm hoping to hear from him. Well, I'm just stating the sort of state of affairs right here is we don't know which way to go. And you said that you had heard of or seen cases where ibuprofen cleared up brain inflammation and changed, a really bad downswing, breakdown, psychosis type of thing and brought the person back. I am in touch with another doctor who said that he has worked with young people, teens and well into their 20s, who have had what appear to be a major breakdown, and in no time, not necessarily because of ibuprofen, but in no time, they've pulled together and they're fine, and that this happens for this people in this age group. I would just like to know your thoughts on all that, if that's okay.
Well, it certainly is something that happens quite often. I interviewed a woman who's across the street from, I believe it's Michigan State University. And if you go to the JourneyStream website and then say journeystream.org /podcast, and you look for the podcast on, early onset psychosis or psychotic episodes. This woman's name, I believe I remember her name being Catherine. It was probably back in relatively early 2020.
Mm-hmm.
But she's actively involved a regional and national level, studying psychotic episodes in people and how often it happens in young people and how much better their results are when they have very early intervention. And, there were startling statistics about how she said across the street, I don't know, let's say there's 30,000 people at the University of Michigan State. And the number, she gave that means there's like 4,000 people over there right now who are going to go through a psychotic episode in their first or second year of college. So it's very much more common than people understand. But since it has such a stigma about it, people don't talk about it. They don't let other people know that they're hearing or seeing things, or that they've suddenly gotten to believe that their parents are against them, and in other than the traditional, teenage rebellious way. And so early intervention is a key, and when they get intervention, they often don't have many multiples of repeat episodes. Whereas the traditional psychiatric model, the current conventional method, at least the way it evolved back in the 1960s and 70s, was, if you have a psychotic episode, that means you're schizophrenic, and this is a lifelong pattern, and you need to be on these meds for the rest of your life, etc. And that's not what has panned out as the truth for most people who have this kind of an episode in their early 20s or late teens. So that's another good interview and some good resources that she talks about that you might be interested in.
I definitely am interested. So the treatment or the intervention wasn't traditional psychiatric. It was more along the lines of PANS, P-A-N-S. Right.
Well, see, the PANS stuff, the P in PANS stands for pediatric, if I understand this correctly, and it's, rapid onset, etc. And there's this disruption in the central nervous system, and there are all kinds of different theories about what causes it and how to treat it. But what they were talking about in this woman who was Catherine, her name will come to me, was talking about early intervention for psychosis, had to do with the family, the community, the individual support, the counseling, the sense of purpose in life, the sorting out, the diet if needed, getting outside rather than being stuck in on a screen or whatever. All of these various things were helpful.
I see.
It's not a one shot fits all kind of a deal.
Got it. That sounds really encouraging and healthy. It's like recalibrating the person back to their own natural health rather than putting on a drug Band-Aid, and then all the side effects from that could get you into trouble down the line, and you never get back to where you should be and would be.
Catherine Adams is her name.
Right.
Psychosis and Early Intervention with Catherine Adams is the topic of that interview. And if you just go to journeystream.org/podcast and type in the search box the word psychosis, it'll come right up with that.
Great.
That interview.
Yeah. That sounds really good, Dr. Tim. That's why I call you up. Yeah. Well, we have a young man here who is doing his darndest, but not feeling good. So I'm very concerned that he gets the right care.
Well, the website for her is ETCH, Early Treatment for Cognitive Health, ETCH Wellness, WELLNESS.org.
Okay. And do you think that podcast might be on there too? I mean, I certainly know how to find it now on Journey Stream. I found many of yours on there.
I don't know if they put the podcast on there, but I just thought I'd give you her direct website. It's the
right. And by the way, is your panel on trauma on Journey's Dream podcast at this point yet?
No,
or is that
no,
part
it
of the
isn't
technical
there.
difficulty? Yeah.
No,
okay.
no, that's just something else altogether. They just last night sent me the early release of it, and they haven't made those recordings available for the people that purchased them yet. They're still doing that work to upload those to the platform.
Okay. Are you getting feedback from people on that webinar?
Well, the feedback they've gotten was that our panel on trauma was successful and they want to do a follow-up. So I don't know
what great.
that they rather than waiting for next year's entire Integrative Mental Health Summit, they've been starting to talk about bringing some of us back just for a specialty panel discussion on trauma.
Wow, so this is a yearly thing they do?
They are going to start doing the Integrative Mental Health Summit on a yearly basis, and this was the first one.
Wow. Does that mean you're going to be one of the people involved again, or is that a whole other thing and you were invited in?
Well, I'm on the board of one of the two companies that hosted this.
Okay.
So
nice.
I don't know what my involvement will be next year, but I don't anticipate being excluded, but I can't say, oh yeah, I'm going to be a presenter. But
right.
You know, these things take on their own life as they get popular and they get exposure, and so we'll just have to see how that goes. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you for listening to the monologue today, and I will look forward to connecting with you again soon. And I'll be sending blessings to you and your family.
Thanks. Thanks very much.
I will remind us all that we come from love. We're made of this stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Welcome, Jeannie Rice.
Thank you, and I apologize. I thought I had myself muted if I was typing in your ear. I was trying to catch...
It's very rapid typing. I wish I could type that quickly, yes.
I was trying to catch all of the links for the ETCH, which is the early treatment
for
cognitive health. Yeah,
and that's
Journey
ETCH
Stream.
Wellness. That's ETCHwellness.org.
Awesome.
And the person that I did the interview with is Catherine Adams. Catherine with a C, Adams, and she's the owner and clinical director of ETCH.
Awesome. Okay, great.
All right. Have a wonderful show.
All right, thank you.
And you have
welcome
what?
Here. I was just going to say, and I've got the a link to the PANS, the Pediatric Acute Onset Neuropsychiatric Syndrome or whatever.
Yeah.
Psychiatric syndrome. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Have a good one.